Well, good morning, everybody. It certainly is a pleasure to have you all here. Welcome to day 1365. 1365 days since we've had a budget here in Washington, D.C. 1365 days since Congress has passed its budget. 1365 days of crisis. And that's how we manage in Washington, D.C. And I think to a degree, a lot of us can agree that probably the worst managed event and the worst managed area in this country is probably the United States Congress. And that's what we're here to do. And that's what we want to change, at least when it comes to the budgeting process. And we had a meeting this morning, a group called No Labels, an organization that I'm part of. And I tried to explain to them that, you know, I come from a No Labels family. I've got a son-in-law that's an Assembly State Senator in Arizona. And he's a Democrat, and he and I get along well, and we come together with ideas, and I think this is what this idea is about. This is a bipartisan, bicameral piece of legislation that we have in front of us today to make Congress work. And I think it's moving it in the right direction. I have colleagues with me today that I really appreciate them taking time out of their busy schedule to help work with me, work with this idea, this concept of making Congress work, putting together plans and ideas. We are, as most of you know, over $16 trillion in debt. $16 trillion of debt, and part of that problem is that we just don't budget here in Washington, D.C. And that $16 trillion, we talked about $1 trillion last year, that's not even accurate. Our increase, our actual increase in our fiscal gap last year was $5 to $6 trillion. So we keep talking about this $1 trillion deficit spending that we do every year. Our gap last year, increased about $5 to $6 trillion. And this is the accrued, we don't do accrued counting here in Washington, D.C. We do cash accounting, so we don't anticipate with the growth for Social Security, the growth for Medicare, the growth for Medicaid, some of those issues are, and that this growth continues. We know that we're $60 to $65 trillion actually in debt here in this country, and it has to stop. It has to stop, and it starts with this budget process here in Washington, D.C. So I'm proud to be part of this effort. This is an effort that I started about 18 months ago to see that we can get Congress, both sides, both the House and the Senate, bring them together and have them pass a budget. Pass a budget that both sides can agree on. We've been doing it for 240 years, and we decided 4 years ago we weren't going to do it anymore. And it's wrong. And it needs to change. And that's the purpose, and that's the proposal for no budget, no pay, is to bring both sides together, Republicans and Democrats. And I have Senator Manchin here with me today to discuss and to be part of this, the solution to this particular problem that we have here in Washington, D.C. And after that, he will introduce the next speaker. I'm pleased to have Joe with us. We have 13 co-sponsors on this bill now, 12 Republicans, and Joe's going to expand that on his side of the aisle. But needless to say, this thing is coming together. We got a vote today, a House vote today, on an issue close to this. It's a no budget, no pay concept that's close enough as far as I'm concerned in getting this problem solved. At least it's on the front burner. So anyway, let me introduce Joe. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for taking time. And Joe, especially thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Appreciate it. Let me just say to Dean, I appreciate so much. He and I are both members of No Labels. I'm a co-chair of No Labels with John Huntsman, a dear friend of mine. We became governors together in 2004. As governors, we work within a balanced budget. I think 49 out of 50 governors and the states have a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. As a governor, I worked every day. First of all, my State of the State address, I present a budget. That was the first thing I do. When you get elected, you have a transition period. You're working off the governor, gives you recommendations, and you put it together and you hand it. The night of the State address is the day I give it to the legislature. That's how we work from day to day through that whole year. And my mind and the concept of, you should be able to make adjustments and live within your means. It's how most West Virginians live their life. It's how most Americans live their life. And what we're trying to do is say, that's how we should operate also in Washington. I know it's a novel idea that we should try to live within our means, but it's something people have expected. And so when I came to Congress, I was very hopeful that we would be able to do that. As Dean said, it's been quite some time since we have worked under that premise. I believe very strongly in this, and I have said if we can't get our job done, then there has to be some type of a penalty or consequences, and that seems to be the most logical one. It's easy for the American public to understand. If they don't do their job, they usually lose it. And if not, they wouldn't get paid. Well, we should be the same. And that's what we're saying. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's just a common sense American issue that people do understand. It's how they live their lives too. We've been working hard on this, and I know that the House has a version. I'm having a hard time saying that we're not living within our means. So I'm having a hard time trying to use a no budget, no pay with a budget issue. This should be strictly an up and down or up or down vote, I believe, but it's going to come across in a little different form. But with that being said, everyone will have to make their decision of how they feel about it. The only thing I know is that we need to have a fiscal strategy. It needs to be done quickly. And I've always been very much supportive of a big fix, if you will. I've been a big proponent of the Bowles-Simpson approach to fixing our fiscal problems. But if you can't even have a budget to work off of, it makes it pretty hard to have a roadmap of where we've got to go and how we're going to get there. So I appreciate Dean. I've been co-sponsored on the bill since we introduced it 18 months ago. I will stay on the bill. I'll be fighting hard. We hope to have more of a bipartisan movement on that, on the common sense issues. And with that, I'd like to turn this over now to my dear friend from Texas, John Cornyn. John? Sure thing.
Well, Joe, thank you. I'm delighted to be here with colleagues, and want to congratulate Senator Heller for being a leader on this issue. Common sense doesn't seem all that common in Washington, D.C. these days, but I think this is a rare display of common sense and one that the American people will heartily endorse. And most importantly, what I hope it will do with this new year, when hope's spring eternal, it will break the ice that has been created around this issue and show some progress on dealing with our budget, with our debt, with Social Security and Medicare, promises we've made to seniors. Give us the encouragement and impetus and the process by which we address how do we preserve and protect those promises, how do we keep our promises to seniors. At the same time, how we confront the moral crisis of spending money we don't have and passing the debt along to our children and grandchildren, about $52,000 for every man, woman, and child in America today. The most aggravating part of this whole fiscal crisis issue is everybody understands it. Everybody knows we can't keep doing what we have been doing. The President of the United States understands it. Democrats understand it. Republicans understand it. But we can't seem to reach critical mass where we actually are going to do something about it. I think that's the genius of this piece of legislation, because once the House announced their strategy, Senator Schumer said, of course, Democrats would have a budget this year. So it's already showing some progress. We look forward to the debate over the priorities for our country. That's the important part of the budget, is you have to establish what your priorities are and live within your means. And I want to congratulate Senator Heller and all those who are supporting this effort. I hope we'll get a broad bipartisan consensus in support of this legislation, get a budget, and get back on a fiscal track where we are no longer spending money we don't have. Senator Lamar Alexander will be our next speaker. Or Senator Ayotte, excuse me, I'm sorry. I didn't
Thank you.
Didn't have the script.
Thank you, Senator Cornyn. I want to thank Senators Heller and Manchin for bringing us all together here, and for their leadership, and for the leadership of all of my colleagues on this incredibly important issue. If you think about it, states do it, counties do it, cities do it, towns do it, businesses do it, families do it, individuals do it. And the fact that our federal government has not done it in 4 years really describes why in that 4-year period, almost 4-year period, we're $5 trillion more in debt. If you don't have a fiscal blueprint, there's no way we'll ever get to the point where we are bringing ourselves on a responsible path, which we have to do. We've seen what's happened in other places in the world. Just common sense tells us that if we don't have a fiscal blueprint where we are prioritizing spending, living within our means, deciding which programs should stay, which ones have outlived their usefulness, then we're going to continue to run trillion-dollar deficits. And in my view, this is the single most important thing that we can do. is to have a responsible budget for our nation. And this is the reason I ran for office. I serve on the Senate Budget Committee. I said this yesterday. I firmly believe this. The most disappointing thing since I've been here as a new member of the Senate is the fact that the Senate Budget Committee has not gotten in there, rolled up their sleeves, and done the work that needs to be done. And I'm very hopeful that we'll do it this year. And if we don't do our jobs, we don't deserve to be paid. And I believe that this is something that we need to do, not only for us, but I'm the mother of an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we see what's coming down for our nation and what we're passing on to the next generation. And we owe it not only to ourselves, but to them, to make sure that we finally do our jobs, get a budget, and start dealing with this fiscal crisis to preserve the greatest country on earth. Thank you.
In Nashville on Sunday morning, I was getting ready to get on the airplane coming up to the inauguration, and I bought a newspaper, and the lady who sold me the paper recognized me and said politely, why don't you get them to do something right up in Washington for a change? And I said, like what? She said, no work, no pay. So Senator Heller and Senator Manchin, and I believe your idea is making its way through. People understand it clearly. I mean, in Tennessee, people know that if you joined the Grand Ole Opry and you refused to sing, you wouldn't get paid. And so they think, well, if you join the United States Senate and you refuse to pass a budget, which is required by law, you shouldn't get paid. And that's the idea. That's the idea here. It is bipartisan in Tennessee. Congressman Jim Cooper from Nashville is a leading supporter of the effort. I think it's a real proposal, one that will soon become law. I think it's because people understand it. You can't balance a budget if you don't have a budget, and we haven't had one in 4 years. I have one other thing I'd like to say. The president's just been reelected. He's had a fine inauguration. He has an agenda he wants to pursue, and he's faced with a single problem no one wants to talk about, which is the fact that all the programs that seniors depend on are going to run out of money before too long. The Medicare trustees say that by 2025, there won't be money to pay the bills for seniors who depend on that. And so I would invite the president to respond to the House of Representatives move this week, which creates a window of 2 or 3 months to use this time to save Social Security, save Medicare, save Medicaid, and fix the debt. We can do that. There are a lot of us here on both sides of the aisle who support that. As Senator Cornyn said, everyone knows it has to be done. It has to be done. And in our country, great crises are solved only by presidential leadership or not at all. So this is an opportunity for our newly elected president. A number of us are willing to work with him to fix the debt. Thank you. Senator Enzi of Wyoming is our wrap-up speaker. Next to wrap-up speaker.
Thank you. And I was in a grocery store, and the person checking me out had no idea who I was, but it was during the fiscal cliff, and he was just complaining, kind of to himself, about how Congress couldn't solve anything. We're going to have to get back to a committee process around here. There's a budget committee that's supposed to do the map, the road map for how we solve the nation's debt crisis. And it hasn't been operating. I've been on that committee for 14 years. The last 4 years, we've held hearings, but we've never marked up a bill. We have got to work the committee process, get it through committee in a bipartisan way, and get it to the floor with unlimited debate. That's how the budget process is designed. It's the only thing that I know of that has unlimited debate. I've seen 200 or 300 amendments put in on the budget before, and we have to cover or have them withdrawn before we can have a final vote on the budget, no matter how long it takes. But that's to get the roadmap. A country or a home or a business or a county or a town, as you mentioned, without a budget is like a ship without a rudder. And that's where we've been. Of course, if you don't have a rudder, every direction you go is okay. No, it's not. That's a good way to have a tragedy. And we talk about the $16 trillion in debt. Nobody's talking about the way that that's increasing not only $1 trillion a year, but we are never decreasing it. We talk about how we've mortgaged the future of our grandkids. Actually, we're up to the point where we're already mortgaging the future of our kids, and we're about to finish off the seniors. So we better get back to a situation where we're doing a budget. Any business that doesn't have a budget, the CEO gets fired. We can't do that here, but we can stop getting paid, and that's what this is about. No budget, no pay. Senator Bozeman.
Thank you, guys, and a special thanks to Senator Heller and Senator Manchin for being the force that's gotten us together in this regard. I had the opportunity of serving with then Congressman Osborne in the House for 6 years, former great coach of Nebraska. And I was with him on so many occasions when people would come up to him and they'd say, "Coach, tell us about winning. Tell us how we accomplish things." And he said, "Well, we didn't talk about winning. What we talked about was doing the little things." And this truly is the appropriations process, and I'm so glad that in this go-round that the appropriations process is included in the bill. But having the appropriations process where you do that in a timely, orderly way, here we are several months into the new calendar year for the government, and we're still living on a continuing resolution. Our agencies don't know where they're at, don't know where they're going to be in the future. So we've got to do that. We've also got to prevent the huge omnibus bills, instead of doing it with the 12 bills separately so that we can really discuss the spending. We just throw all this stuff together in this giant bill that makes it very difficult to deal with. So we've got to get back to the appropriations process. We've got to get back to the budget. The budget is not just a number. You know, we're under this thing where we've already got a budget. No, you know, you can't just list a number. You have to list what you're going to do with the dollars that are coming in, so that we can get back to an orderly situation, so that we truly can solve the problem that we all agree is the greatest crisis that we're facing, and that is our deficit, and then continuing to add to the debt, not stabilizing it. So again, thank you guys so much for your efforts.
Thanks, buddy.